You could make the same exact kind of arguments. It helps women focus on their career. It saves them money. But instead of fetuses, you say, what about 2-year-olds? What if women could kill 2-year-olds? You could make the same argument. Say, hey, it would save them a lot of money, a lot of time. They could focus on school and their careers if they could just kill 2-year-olds, right? It's the same kind of argument. But does it sound like it still makes sense? Like, does that seem valid?
No, I was just thinking a funny way. You could even take it further where a wife could kill her husband because then she'll get his money and then she will be able to focus on her career a lot more.
Right.
She'll be able to focus on her personal life a lot more.
Right. Hello. Welcome to the Second Advent podcast. My name is Mira Williams,
My name is Shigeru Toshiro.
and today we are going to talk about abortion. Abortion is one of the most important political issues in our country and the world today, if not the most important, and for obvious reasons. There are 1 million abortions in the U.S. every year, which means that there are 1 million murders in the U.S. every year committed on the most innocent and defenseless among us. So morally, this issue is incredibly significant. Politically, this topic is also significant as well. For Democrats, one of their main demographics, one of their most ardent supporters, are unmarried women. Single women make up a significant portion of their voting base, and for single women, abortion oftentimes is their number one issue, the issue they care most about. So, morally it's significant, politically it's significant, so that's why I want to talk about it today. And also, Trump fulfilled on his promise. He was able to get Roe versus Wade overturned, which was a great first step, but unfortunately the battle is not over. In the U.S., many states have effectively done significant bans on abortion, but not all. Also, the number of abortions hasn't even really changed. It's about the same as it was before Roe, and which is terrible. And the reason that is because many people are just going across state lines or ordering abortion pills online. So the number is still the same. So we still need to keep fighting this.
I think, one of the reasons it's so important is because if we are right, if it is, I think actually, even though it is a big issue, many people take it lightly because if we are right, then we are talking about the murder of millions and millions and millions of lives, which is not something to take lightly, So this is why it is very important to talk about these issues because it's not just a political issue, and on a moral level, you're committing an atrocity, So it is very important to figure this out, and we understand that it's a bunch of misinformation, but that's why we want to clarify so that people can be aware of this and in their own lives make better decisions.
Yeah, the implications of this debate, the outcome of this debate is really severe, like you're saying. Like, if it's true that abortion is murder, then we are literally murdering 1 million babies every year. So yeah, this is really, we need to settle this. So we all need to keep fighting. We need to do that through winning debates, and swaying public opinion. There are some people who say that maybe debates aren't effective tools of motivating people. Maybe it's just it's like just they become pointless arguments. But to that, I would say that, if we recall who was assassinated last year, the major political figure in America was Charlie Kirk. What did Charlie Kirk do? He mostly debated people on college campuses, and he was effective. He was incredibly effective. A lot of people credit him for being one of the main factors as to why Trump was reelected. And so that's why he was assassinated, because he was effective, and his tool was mainly debate. So, debate is definitely a valuable thing to learn how to do because we need to be able to engage in the battle of ideas. Because if you can't win the battle of ideas, then you have to win the battle other ways, which are, we want to at all costs avoid. So, my goal our goal in this video is to give people, the listeners, tools you need to win these debates and go over and analyze the main pro-abortion arguments, break them down, so that you can too. And then at the end, we will also, because this is the Second Advent podcast.
Can you clarify your stance on abortion? Like, where do you lie? Because I know some people say, oh yeah, abortion is fine in cases of rape, or abortion is okay, in these certain circumstances. or before a certain time. So can you make clear what your position on abortion is?
Yeah, there are dozens of different stances on this issue. That's true. So, even on the pro-life side. So basically, my stance is that after the moment of conception, that is a person, that is a human being with the right to life. So we should treat them as such. The only exceptions that you should allow for an abortion are there are cases like ectopic pregnancies where they implant in the wrong place, and so it's not viable. They're not going to survive. The mother will not survive either if it continues. So in that case, you're just weighing two lives, but the baby is not going to survive anyway. So that's really those kind of cases where it's truly the mother's life at stake and the fetus is not going to survive anyways, that I think abortion is morally acceptable. I don't think rape is tragic. Rape is one of the worst crimes you can commit against a person, but that doesn't make it okay to kill the baby inside. Yeah, so basically after the moment of conception, that's a person. And the only exceptions would be where it's truly the case of the mother's life. So at the end, we're going to also read quotes from the returning Messiah, Reverend Moon, the second coming of Christ and our true Father, and to get his perspective on this issue, because this is the Second Advent podcast. So, pro-abortion arguments, they fall into one of three categories. There's utilitarian arguments, there's bodily autonomy arguments, and there's personhood arguments. So we're going to go over each of these. Now, before we do, I want to explain a concept first, because this is a recurring theme in each of the categories that we really want to get solidified before we move on, and that's the concept of personhood. So you could use the word person every day, but in this debate, that word has a specific context. In the context of the abortion debate, a person means you have a human being with rights, specifically the right to life. That is what a person is in this debate.
That would be separate from like a spirit, because I know some people can believe in personhood but don't really believe in a internal spirit.
Yeah, you don't. If you can approach the topic from a religious viewpoint, you can approach it from a secular viewpoint. I'm mostly gonna just address the secular, because I want to show that, obviously, for religious people, Christians, abortion is obviously wrong. There's no debate to be had. If the fetus does have an eternal soul, which we believe, then it's obvious why this is a crime. But I'm going to even show that even if you're an atheist, even if you're just a secular person, your own arguments for abortion still do not work. You don't even need to be religious in order to win these debates. And so, on the concept of person, person it's technically separate from the word human in this context. So, to explain it, like, all persons are humans, but not all humans are persons. And what I mean by that is, for an example, you could have someone who is permanently brain dead. This is different from someone who's in a coma who's going to wake up. Someone who's truly brain dead, and they do medical examinations to determine, like rigorous tests to determine whether or not someone is permanently brain dead and whether they're ever going to come out of it. And in every U.S. state, permanent brain death is considered legal death. That's treated the same as actual death. You could keep the body alive through artificial means like ventilators or respirators or feeding tubes and things like this. But at that point, if the brain is dead, and even like the lower brain, and you know that the person's not having any conscious experience, at least a physical, maybe their spirit has moved on, but a physical conscious experience has ended, then at that point, that body's more of just human tissue at that point, not really a person. So it's the same with like sperm and eggs, human sperm and eggs. It's human tissue; those are human cells, but we don't consider them persons. We don't give them the right. Even the staunchest pro-life people aren't going to give personhood, the right to life, to sperm or eggs. Those are still human tissue. Okay, so just this term personhood, it's important to understand how we use it in the context of this debate. And actually, the third kind of category of debate, of argument, pro-abortion argument, is called personhood arguments, where they try to specifically deny the personhood of the fetus. And that's what that whole debate is focused on. The other two arguments, bodily autonomy and utilitarian, they try to get around personhood. They say, well, regardless of whether you consider fetuses persons or not, whether they really have the right to life, we should allow abortions for other reasons. And they'll go into why. So,
I think the study of DNA also is really powerful when it comes to personhood. But and I think that's why a lot of utilitarians and sorry, what was the second argument?
Bodily autonomy.
Yeah, bodily autonomy. That's why they try to go around it because DNA is pretty clear that there's a new person. You know, I understand like they that they talk about the consciousness and realm of it, and whether they really have full being, but they do have even from the moment of conception a different DNA. Like I heard a really good argument. It's like if I scratch my skin and I have billions of cells coming off my skin, right? But those are I think the word you used was saponic cells. So basically, they have the same DNA. It's part of his body. But if you took out the egg and sperm that met to create the zygote, right? They have a completely different DNA, which is very clear. It's like they already have a very different name than you.
Yeah, when the sperm and egg unite, that is the creation of a fully unique human being that's never existed before. And that's really biologically why we choose conception as the point when new life begins. Sperm and egg are more even just like you said, like just skin tissue at that point because they come from you and they only have your DNA. But biologically, we are defined by our DNA. It's what determines our traits, our features, everything, how we develop. And it's at conception that is solidified and when their biological identity is established and when they now have the active potential to become a person is set. So that's the logical reason why we choose conception from a scientific viewpoint, and we'll get more into that when we talk about personhood. One other thing I want to address real quick before we get into utilitarian arguments is that when engaging the pro-abortion crowd, they will very quickly and consistently go to cases of rape, right? And for obvious reasons. It's because it has the most emotional weight in their favor, right? And so now there is a completely logically consistent and logical argument as to be made as to why, a fetus conceived in rape doesn't deserve death any more than a fetus conceived in the consensual sex. So there's a clear argument to be made why they don't deserve to die. But it's also the case that rape only accounts for 1% of all abortions. 99% of the time, the vast majority come from consensual, partners. And so, on the pro-life side, we could, if we made abortion illegal, but allowed for exceptions in cases of rape, we would still effectively ban abortion because you would still be getting rid of 99% of all abortions. And so my point is that they focus so much time and effort on this one case, on this one kind of situation, which is not representative of the whole. It's only a minor fraction of the issue at large, is my point.
Yeah, I found most of the arguments are emotional based, and it's interesting because if you change certain aspects of the story, you can really shift the emotional weight. So, like an example of that is as far as this concept of double murders, if you murder a pregnant woman, right? It's like, if a woman was really excited and she was pregnant, she tells all her girlfriends, hey, I'm pregnant, and she was getting ready for the baby and she was super excited about the baby. But then, unfortunately, the baby dies, right? Maybe she had a car accident or something like that that killed the baby, right? Then, all the females, even those females who were around her, or even men too, if they were pro-abortion, they would still feel sorry for that woman because she was so excited for the baby, right? And for the life and what could have been. But then for a woman who was pregnant and didn't want to get pregnant, and she's like telling her the same amount of friends, right, that, hey, I'm pregnant, I got to get an abortion, like I can't go through this kind of thing, then they still feel sorry for her. And then so when she she goes through with the abortion, right, the same product, right, the baby is dead, right, it's the same outcome, but the emotion is completely different. So it shows that they're not really focused on what is actually happening to the baby. It's all about the mother's desire, whether the mother wants to have the baby or not. That's really the outcome, but it doesn't solve the issue of what's happening to the baby. So it's just a very emotional kind of smoke and mirrors rather than an intellectual argument.
Yeah, you're kind of just bypassing the issue of who it is or what it is that you're killing right now. And they say the slogan of pro-choice is "My body, my choice." Right? That's their mantra. But what about the girl in your womb, the baby girl? What about her choice? What about her body? Like, it's kind of like actually, I'm gonna get into it later. I'm gonna make a comparison to slavery, but that's gonna come up.
Yeah.
So let's move on to utilitarian arguments. So I'm gonna start with them because utilitarian arguments are, in fact, the weakest of the three kinds, and I'll explain why. So utilitarian arguments, they say abortion provides some utility for women. It benefits women somehow. They'll say it empowers them. So to that end, they'll say things like, well, abortion levels a playing field between men and women. It allows women to focus on their higher education, on their careers. It helps them to avoid poverty by not having kids that they can't afford. These kind of arguments, right? And now, these arguments are the weakest because they have pretty much a single fatal flaw to them. And that is that you could make the same exact kind of arguments. It helps women focus on their career. It saves them money. But instead of fetuses, you say, what about 2-year-olds? What if women could kill 2-year-olds? You could make the same argument. Say, hey, it would save them a lot of money, a lot of time. They could focus on school and their careers if they could just kill 2-year-olds, right? It's the same kind of argument. But does it sound like it still makes sense? Like, does that seem valid?
Yeah. No, I was just thinking a funny way. You could even take it further where a wife could kill her husband because then she'll get his money and then she will be able to focus on her career a lot more.
Right.
She'll be able to focus on her personal life a lot more.
Right. Yeah.
Because she'll kill her husband.
It doesn't have to stop at 2-year-olds. If we're allowed to kill people now, if it benefits us monetarily, then it doesn't make any sense. So you'll say that to people, and then their response will be, well, that's not fair because fetuses and 2-year-olds, they're very different. And it's true, they are different, but then the question becomes, what's morally relevant about those differences?
Yeah.
Why are we treating one kind of person in one way and another kind of person in a different way? What's the moral difference? And then that becomes a whole other debate. That becomes the personhood argument. That's what the personhood argument's all about, the third category.
Yeah.
The third category is about whether or not fetuses are persons, whether or not people with rights. And so as soon as you press on utilitarian arguments, they fall apart because they completely depend on what the outcome of the personhood argument is. So without the personhood argument being settled, utilitarian arguments are pretty much kind of meaningless on their own because they don't, if we acknowledge that fetuses are persons, no utilitarian argument works, right? And so because these kind of arguments depend entirely on the outcome of personhood, this is what makes them weakest on their own.
Yeah.
Because they're basically meaningless. So another kind of argument in this category is back alley abortions. So people will say, well, if you make abortions illegal, then we're gonna have abortions anyways. We're gonna go to the back alleys. We're gonna have illegal abortions, and then because those are inherently riskier and more dangerous, then more women will die from infections and things like this. And it's true that women who die under such circumstances, that this is a real tragedy, especially if it is women who are pressured to do so by the fathers. But it's also true that women are agents with free will, right? Instead of taking part in a dangerous back alley abortion, they could give birth to their child and give them up for adoption. Pregnancy and childbirth are not easy things to go through. I've seen my wife give birth to 3 children. It's a very difficult thing to go through. It's also true that in the U.S., childbirth has a 99.9% survival rate. So in terms of safety, the safer thing to do is to give birth rather than to have some risky, dangerous back alley abortion.
Yeah, I remember there was also a lot of information about the emotional damage that it causes to have an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And also how much, I forget how much, I think it was like it was just a huge increase also they found for breast cancer,
Oh, really?
for abortions. Yeah, because you're,
From the pill?
no, from just any abortion, because
Okay.
the mother's breasts are preparing for the baby, right?
Mhm.
And they're preparing for the milk.
Mm-hmm.
But then when the hormones are cut off mid-pregnancy, while the breasts are still preparing,
Mhm.
it causes a huge increase. And actually, when abortions, there's a clear correlation between when abortions became more prevalent
Mhm.
and when breast cancer started surging.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because I mean, you can imagine that your body's not meant for this, right? It's not meant for a
It's not the natural way for it to progress. Yeah.
And even when you have like a natural stillbirth or something like that, like your body is aware of it,
Right.
right? Your body's not aware of a doctor coming in, cutting you open, and ripping out.
Right. Your body thought
a
everything was
fetus.
going as normal. Yeah.
Yeah. Because your body will sense certain, like
The baby and the body give feedback to each other.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, and most, stillbirths or most what's it called, miscarriages happen very early stage too.
Right.
It's a very low percentage that happen, past the 3-month period.
Right.
And that's really when the breasts start developing. So, yeah, especially late-term abortions create a huge amount or a huge risk for breast cancer, but also psychological issues too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge increase of depression,
Mm-hmm.
and women have a really hard time coming over that. They don't talk about those kind of issues that happen to women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So talking about empowering women, they ignore those issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another fun example for your argument is that, making the back alley abortion argument is kind of like saying, well, we should just let people rob because otherwise they might go to stores and try to steal something, then
And
they'll
they
be
make
shot.
Right. Right.
It's
yeah.
like, yeah, but
When you engage in illegal things, it tends to be
Yeah,
dangerous.
it tends to be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. That's also true. So, and I say, women are agents of free will. It's also definitely the case that men, fathers, are pressuring mothers to get abortions. This is a real issue. So we can't just put everything on the women. We also need to, these men who are pressuring women to get illegal back alley abortions, they also need to be, prosecuted and held responsible for this. Again, this back alley argument also falls apart in the same way. If we recognize that fetuses are persons. If fetuses are persons, then again, just look at the numbers. There's 1 million abortions every year. I want to reemphasize that. 1 million every year, okay? And if those are persons, that literally means it's 1 million murders, okay? And so that number would be vastly greater than the number of women who tragically die in back alley abortions, right? So the numbers are not comparable. Another argument that pro-abortion people will make is that they'll say, well, you pro-life people, you're hypocritical because you care all about the babies when they're in the womb, but after they're born, you could care less because you're not in support of like government sponsorship or support for single mothers, right? They'll make this, they'll call us hypocrites for that. So to respond to that, there is an ongoing debate about how best to address the topic of single motherhood, because some people say, oh, well, government assistance helps those in need, but those on the conservative side will say that, well, maybe this is disincentivizing marriage because people, if you get married to your baby daddy, now all of a sudden you're receiving less benefits, and they point to the at least correlation between the welfare state and the decline of the nuclear family in America. So there's a debate to be had about what's the best way to address the issue of single motherhood, but we can agree, but this argument doesn't work because killing children is not the answer. To explain that, I want to give an analogy to
it doesn't go to the core issue.
Yeah, it doesn't get to the core issue,
Yeah.
and so you're kind of bypassing it. So, like to make an analogy, homelessness is also an issue in America. It's a big problem, and there's no state that's been able to really come up with a solution to the problem of homelessness. And so we're all, we're still trying to figure out how best to address this, how to help them, how to solve the issue, the core issue. But we can all agree that just going around killing homeless people is not the answer. That would, in effect, solve the issue, but it's not the right way to go, right? And so the same applies to abortion. Again, we can disagree on how to best to handle the problem of single motherhood, but simply killing unwanted children is not the answer. It's like if you saw someone on the street attacking a homeless person. They're just attacking them, and you're like, "Stop! Stop! What are you doing? Stop!" And they turn to you and they go, "Hey, what are you gonna? Are you gonna buy them a house? Are you gonna buy them a house?" I'm like, "No, but I can't." And then they just kill them. Right? It doesn't make any sense. Okay? But this is analogous to what they're saying. All we're saying is that we don't want babies killed in the womb. He's like, "Oh well, if you don't support government sponsorship for single mothers, then you must not really care." It doesn't make any sense.
I think I know some people think that when you kind of take these analogies and you kind of put them to the extreme, it can sound kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But there is actually good sense in doing that especially in debating, because taking it something to the extreme. I mean, if you look at mathematics, right? A lot of the mathematics, you don't look at every single part of the like. You don't for an equation, right, to work.
Mm.
You don't plug in every single number. You put in the extremes, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
this equation makes sense on the low end, on the high end,
Mhm.
and then you can kind of correlate that. Okay, for everything in between, it makes sense. So this is
Mm.
how I always looked at taking these analogies and pushing to the extreme. Does it still follow the same train
Mhm.
of thought? So you may think it sounds kind of cold and heartless or ridiculous making these analogies, but it actually is very important for these debate topics because
Mhm.
even though, yeah, it seems extreme, you can see the logic doesn't hold up.
Yeah, that's in debating. The term is I think it's called reductio absurdum. It's when you take someone's logic that they're using. In this case, you say, okay, if we apply the same logic in another case, does your logic still hold up? And that's what we're showing with these analogies. And so, also on the topic of conservatives being accused of not wanting to support mothers of with unwanted pregnancies, to that end, there are many pregnancy crisis centers around the country, right, which are founded on conservative Christian values. They do discourage women from abortion, but they also provide material support. They provide support during and after pregnancy in the form of pregnancy tests, limited ultrasounds, diapers, formula, clothing, parenting classes, and also referrals for adoption or social services to support the moms. So conservatives support single moms in that way. Also, for the record, Christians in the U.S. are more than twice as likely than the general U.S. public to adopt or be foster parents. So it shows that we do care about children more than the rest of the country as a whole. So when you look at utilitarian arguments, seeing as how they are so weak, you wouldn't expect them to be that popular. But the sad part, though, is that they are. So much so to the extent that, so again, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, it was the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. In that decision, two of the Supreme Court justices named Sotomayor and Kagan, they were part of the dissent. They voted against overturning Roe versus Wade. And they themselves use a utilitarian argument in favor of abortion. They basically say we should keep abortion because we like it. What they said was, the ability of women to participate equally in the economic and social life of the nation has been facilitated by their ability to control their reproductive lives. So they're essentially making, this is a utilitarian argument. It's the worst kind. And in their dissent, they don't even address the topic of personhood at all, even though, as we explained, personhood comes before utilitarian. Utilitarian falls apart if fetuses are persons, right? But they don't even address personhood. They don't even try to.
Even to that point, you could even make a utilitarian argument against these utilitarian arguments, saying that because like South Korea, right, is struggling because people aren't having kids, and there's been shown that if South Korea doesn't change this, they're gonna die. Basically, they're not gonna have enough people to sustain their economy. It takes people to sustain an economy.
Right.
So you could even make just a pure utilitarian argument that it's not good for the economy. It's not good for the what was the word he used for the American civilization as a whole to have these abortions because you need people to produce the economy, right?
Right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, you could even hit it from the other way, but we don't try to do that because
It's not really
the issue is whether or not it's murder. That's what we
Yeah.
should care about, right?
Yeah.
So you could very easily make this, like you said, the same arguments in the other direction. So the fact that Sotomayor and Kagan did that just goes to show that even at the highest levels, leftists are still perfectly willing to use the worst arguments in defense of abortion. And speaking of empowering women, because that's what this utilitarian arguments are supposedly for. They want to empower women. In terms of empowering women, rather than just giving women abortions, how about instead to empower them, we teach them how to use discernment, how to avoid, dirtbags, men who will obviously be deadbeat dads, and instead how to choose high-quality men, men who will stay committed to them and provide for them, and who they want to genuinely raise a family with. I feel like that would be true empowerment, rather than just teach women how to, kill their children that they don't want to have with women who they don't want to raise a family with.
Yeah, that used to be the core Christian value of Americans. The father would always vet the men, who the daughter was seeing.
Right.
And that, for me as a father, I have
the parents are more involved.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I have 2 girls right now and a third girl on the way. So it's
Mhm.
like this issue is also very on the front of my mind, as
Mhm.
far as abortion, because and once you have children, it really changes the emotional aspect of abortion, because seeing your child born really makes you realize the extent of evil abortion is, because seeing how that child could have came to life and
Mhm.
thinking about how if that child had died in the mother, like how terrible that would be.
Mhm. Yeah, abortion. The topic of abortion definitely hits you different once you start having your own children, and you see how beautiful and what a blessing they are, and
Yeah.
how your life would be, if you were to lose them, how terrible, like truly tragic that would be, right?
And like what you're saying here is like, I think abortion is a bigger issue. It's kind of like it's a result of a bigger issue of this breakdown of the family. I think that's kind of what you're saying here, is that it's
Mhm.
not only just women who are causing this problem, but it's the society as a whole. It's the family relationship that's
It's
breaking
the
down.
culture.
Yeah, it's the culture.
Yeah, yeah, and so speaking of men who are responsible, we are also responsible for this problem. We can't just accuse women. Men are also a part of this. It takes two to tango, right? Women, by and large, don't get pregnant by themselves. Men are involved in the process, and so fathers who pressure women to get abortion, this needs to stop. We need to take responsibility for our actions, right? You can't get your responsibilities as a father by killing your child. That's not how a grown man operates, right? We need to be mature men who take care of our families, and like you said, looking at your girls, thinking of how you're going to raise them, who they're going to get married to. We need to raise our sons to be grown men, to be men who are providers, protectors, and priests in their households, and not guys who just knock up women and then ditch her, right? Before we close for this episode, again, this is the Second Advent podcast, so I want to share some quotes by True Father on what he has said specifically on the topic of abortion. So he says, "I tell brides and grooms to have many children. To bear many children and raise them is God's blessing. It is unthinkable that human beings apply their own standard of judgment and arbitrarily abort precious lives given to them by God. All life born into this world embodies God's will. All life is noble and precious, so it must be cared for and protected." So here he's talking about how children are precious. They're God's greatest blessing. They're not a burden. They're God's gift to us. Lives are precious, right? We need to care for them and protect them. He also says, "For America to survive, every family should put absolute love in their family life and produce as many children as possible, balanced with that love. If a family advocates free sex, do they have peace? Eternally not. Even in a mind that seeks free sex, there are many people who appear as their spouse whom they can pursue. As a wife, if she practices free sex and sleeps with many men besides her husband, she may end up with a baby conceived with a man she actually hates. So where can she find peace in such a world? This is why every year hundreds of thousands of babies are thrown in the garbage can." He means abortion.
Yeah.
"Can such women find peace? Do they feel peace during the pregnancy? Won't she be afraid of the baby and feel cursed? Will God protect such a woman?" I feel like that is he's talking about the culture,
Yeah.
right? How, the free sex culture is really what leads to the breakdown of the family, what leads to abortion, what leads to all the issues. It's family values that ultimately will solve this issue,
Yeah.
right? And that's
the
what
breakdown of the family. Yeah.
yeah, it's through having God-centered, loving, committed families is how we really break this curse. He also says, "There is much debate about abortion. Abortion is wrong. A fetus is more than just a few cells. It represents love, life, and lineage, and by killing it, you will kill the parents. We must guard the fetus with our lives." So, thank you, Father, for those quotes. So, that's going to be the end for this video, for this podcast. Upcoming videos, we will continue with analyzing the other two kinds of pro-abortion arguments, like I said, bodily autonomy and personhood, explaining why those also are logically flawed and inconsistent, and providing analogies, like you said, when you take their logic and apply them to other situations, the logic quickly falls apart.
Comment below if you want his wife to show up next time.
Yeah, so it's not just two guys. Yeah, sure. And And again, we want to continue to give you more tools and how you yourself can engage in debates and win debates with people, so we can all do our part to fight this evil practice, the abortion, which is the murder of literally, truly the most innocent and defenseless among us. And we will continue to read more from True Father, the Second Coming, and where he explains more the importance of family and how children are God's greatest blessing and are thus precious and need to be protected at all costs. And so we hope that this was helpful for you and that it made sense. And we thank you for listening. And thank you.